Tuesday morning. My voice is okay because the Yankees got ahead of the Indians Guardians fairly early last night, so it was not a yell at the TV night. I begin with a major story. Plagiarism is a big deal. You may not think that, you may not know that, but plagiarism is very serious. In the university world, of which I've been a part since 1996, one verified charge of plagiarism loses a tenured professor their tenure. It gets students expelled. It leads to the loss of research dollars. Why? It's a combination of lying, because you're claiming someone else's work for yourself, and theft, because you're stealing someone else's work, equaling fraud upon the institution for whom you work or upon the people for whom you are providing product or to whom you are selling product. Plagiarism is an unqualified bad thing. Kamala Harris is a plagiarist. We found that out yesterday because of the work of Christopher Rufo of the Manhattan Institute. Now, Christopher Rufo is a very serious man with a very long pedigree and an extraordinary ability to upset the left because he understands what matters and he writes persuasively. Yesterday, he published Kamala Harris's plagiarism problem at his Substack. It's ChristopherRufo.com. And he went through a report by an Australian professor who dives into allegations of plagiarism and who found in Kamala Harris's book before her run for California Attorney General, which she co-authored with Joan O.C. Hamilton. It's a small book. It's called Smart on Crime, A Career Prosecutor's Plan to Make Us Safer. It's a puff book. It's the kind of book a candidate puts out before a campaign. But with those kinds of books, you've got to be very careful when you hire a co-author, and I suspect that Ms. Hamilton did most of the writing, but Kamala Harris's name is on it. You've got to say at the beginning, be very careful, I'm a public figure, no plagiarism. Well, there are at least 12 instances of plagiarism in the book. 12. That's a lot. Now, Christopher Rufo details a number of these, including lifting verbatim language from an uncited NBC News report, another airlifted section from a John Jay College of Criminal Justice press release, a very long passage directly from Wikipedia, which is amusing and extraordinary because Wikipedia, nobody trusts Wikipedia. I tried to use a Wikipedia quote as a joke once in a Washington Post column, and they rejected the joke because they were afraid that someone would take it seriously. She lifted promotional language from an Urban Institute report. It goes on and on. So the story made it out yesterday. CNN picked it up pretty early on CNN.com. Conservative activist accuses Harris of plagiarizing passages in co-authored 2009 book. Notice it's not Harris accused of plagiarism. It's not Harris committed plagiarism. It's conservative activist accuses Harris of plagiarism. Then Newsweek came out with Kamala Harris, smart on crime, plagiarism claims everything we know, and ran through it. The only mention it got yesterday, and it's the first day of the story, but it was yesterday, was on the 5. Greg Gutfeld brings it up. Let's play Greg bringing it up. Cut
Judge,
number.
So Kamala keeps saying, oh, she wants to separate herself from Joe. And then, of course, she gets accused of plagiarism, which, again, it puts her in sync with Joe.
Yeah, all right, right. So Greg Gutfeld brings it up. Later on Fox News, The Story, Jillian Turner is the host. She asked Tim Murtaugh, who works for Donald Trump. Right, Tim Murtaugh is part of the Trump campaign. Asked him about the plagiarism by Kamala Harris, cut number 23.
So, Tim, I want to make sure I get this in before I let you go very quickly, if you don't mind. She's going to sit down with Fox News Channel for the first time in history for an official interview. Your candidate's obviously been on with us hundreds of times. I don't know how many. Do you have any advice for her?
Sure. Come up with an answer that is somehow believable about how it is that you share yet another thing in common with Joe Biden. She's now accused of plagiarizing the book that she wrote about crime, stealing things from Wikipedia, of all sources. That's what she stands accused of. I'd love to hear an answer for that. Joe Biden had the same problem, as you may remember, the first time he ran for president. So one and the same, even including plagiarism.
That accusation, of course, coming
Now,
from...
Tim Murtaugh is very good, but he shouldn't say accused of plagiarism. She is guilty of plagiarism. Now, in the Telegraph, Great Britain's center-right newspaper, Poppy Coburn has a column this morning. The Kamala Harris plagiarism row is a disaster for her campaign. It threatens to compound the perception that she is out of ideas. That's true. What's interesting is it's in the Telegraph. It's not in the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, and indeed you will not find any story at all in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post about the plagiarism. You will find a New York Times story that says, oh, it's minor, not a big deal. Well, Christopher Rufo last night took apart the New York Times response, and I want to read you what he said last night. The New York Times is lying about my plagiarism story, and I have the receipts to prove it. 1. The Times claimed that I only argued that Kamala Harris plagiarized, quote, 5 sections involving about 500 words. But this isn't true, writes Rufo. In my story, I wrote that Stephen Weber, the Australian, argued there were more than a dozen instances of vicious plagiarism. This past Saturday, I provided the New York Times not only with my written analysis, which argues that there were more than a dozen, but with Weber's full dossier, which included 18 allegations of varying severity. So the Times deliberately withheld this crucial contextual information from its readers and from the supposed plagiarism expert who, based on this limited information, called it not serious. They could have easily confirmed more than a dozen point, but instead they lied by omission. 2. The Times claimed that none of the passages in question took the ideas or thoughts of another writer. This is preposterous, concludes Rufo. Harris not only copied multiple paragraphs of other people's work verbatim, but she often lifted those ideas directly and at face value. In one case, she came to the wrong conclusion because she copied Wikipedia. In other words, i.e., she stole a very bad idea, copied the language verbatim, and got the point wrong. That's the full Monty of plagiarism. He continues. 3. The Times provides one example of plagiarism from my story, which suggests it was a minor copy and paste of 2 short sentences. But this is supremely misleading. The violation was not 2 sentences, but rather 5 sentences. And then he provides the actual context. 4. The Times suggests that noticing Kamala Harris's plagiarism is somehow racist, even though the paper has covered plagiarism by many other political figures. My rule, writes Rufo, of working with journalists is simple. If you treat me fairly, I treat you fairly. After publication of the Times piece, I called the reporter and editor at the Times to ask politely for correction. The editor, Mary Sue, had nothing but excuses, and so we're going to fight this one out. They should issue a correction, but even if they do not, I will correct the record in public. Kamala Harris now has another problem 3 weeks before the election. She is a plagiarist. Christopher Rufo brought the receipts. Read everything you can about it, and then look to see. This is the Hunter Biden laptop of 2020. Now, yesterday I told you, and earlier today I posted on my X account, Hugh Hewitt. And you can find this monologue later today at YouTube. I want you to send it, everyone. I posted today, and I told you yesterday, Gallup's new poll shows that trust in legacy media, in mainstream media, and whatever you want to call it, media, has reached an all-time low. Only 33% somewhat or totally trust the mainstream media. 36% say it's garbage, and in-betweener opinions. It's the lowest number ever for mass media. That's what the term they use, mass media in the Gallup poll. Why? Because Americans watched the Hunter Biden laptop story get buried, only to discover that Hunter Biden has to go to jail because of it, because it was true, it was his laptop. And now we have Kamala Harris plagiarizing her one book. Now, I've written 14 books, and I know how hard it is to keep making sure again and again, every day, that everything you write, I write my own books. I don't use a ghostwriter. I don't use a co-author. I've only co-authored one book with the great Hank Adler. It was on The Fair Tax Fantasy, he's the accountant, I'm the lawyer, so we're co-authored there, but we both checked each other's work because plagiarism does and ought to destroy the reputation of people who engage in it. I've been a writer for 35 years. I've been teaching since 1996. I've authored 14 books, countless articles, never been accused of plagiarism because I don't plagiarize. Because if you plagiarize, you are a fraud. You are a cheat, and you are lying, and you are stealing. Kamala Harris is a plagiarist, and there is no getting around that fact. And the United States legacy media is covering it up. Astonishing. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Big show ahead. Stay with us.